Hi, everybody. This is Rob Packard from Medical Device Academy. And today's webinar is actually going to be also recorded and posted on YouTube Live. So this is one of our few free webinars that is related to the FDA eSTAR. This is also going to be bundled with our procedure SYS 44. There's really no way to separate these two because the guts of what you're providing for software validation to the FDA is what is covered in SYS 44. That's our procedure for software validation. And this procedure is really targeted at those folks out there that have software as a medical device, but the same rules apply for software in a medical device and firmware. So regardless of which type you have, which type of software you have, this procedure still applies. And it's not going to be one of our longest webinars. We're not going to go deep into each area, but this is sort of your roadmap for how you apply this procedure and how you attach documents in the FDA eSTAR and what order they occur in. And we're going to even have a little surprise at the end for what do you do post-market. So after you've gotten your 510K, then what do you do? And that's a really important part. So as I always say, this is going to be recorded. So if you have anything proprietary, please schedule a meeting with me afterwards. I have a link at the end for scheduling free consultations with me. You can use that. There's also my phone number there, so you can text me, even WhatsApp me on a weekend, whatever. And I think this is going to be one of our best webinars. So please, any questions you have, feel free to unmute your mic and ask a question. Feel free to put it in the chat. And I hope this is really helpful for you, for everybody out there. And this is very important to be following along with the procedure. So if you don't have a procedure for software development and you don't know what 62304 is, you're going to have to watch this more than once. Okay, here we go. So number one, the software development standards. We have three of them here. One of them is 62304. That is the most important of your standards. When you are hiring somebody to help you with software development, whether it's a subcontractor or an employee, if they don't know what 62304 is, if that doesn't immediately bring something to mind, unless it's the most nervous person in the world that forgets everything, including their name, they're not the person to hire. So that's number one. Number two, you have IEC 62304 and you have IEC 81001. And there are all kinds of other networking standards out there. There are security standards. There are cybersecurity standards and guidance documents. We can't go into all of them, but the most important of all of them here is the 62304. And that is the basis for classification of software as well. So you have your ABC classifications, and the FDA even says in their guidance documents that they expect you to have a process that's compliant with 62304. So there is no way around this. Even internationally, that's what the expectations are. So when you have medical device software, this is what you use. If you don't have medical device software, I can understand why you might not be familiar with this standard, but there is such a huge difference in the documentation expectations, not so much how many documents you have to create, but what they're called, what the jargon is, how they're labeled, and how it has to be organized. This is the standard you need to be following. Integrated with the software design and development process is risk management, just like we have risk management and everything, but everybody out there that does software for the first time tries to apply ISO 14971. Yes, that is the standard for risk management in medical devices. But in a software as a medical device, it's almost useless because everything's like, what kind of harm are you going to cause? And they're like, well, software can't hurt anybody. It's just software. No. So there are all kinds of risks. So when I get these little itty bitty tiny risk management tables that look just like a design FMEA that they learned from 14971, and it's got 3 or 4 lines, that's not going to be adequate for your software risk management file that you have to submit to the FDA. And they no longer are letting you get away with just a software hazard analysis. Now they want you to provide actually the whole risk management file for software. So they've raised the bar a lot in 2023. And the standard that you should be looking at, it's actually a technical report from AAMI 80,002-1. It's a 2009 document. And right in the title, it says that it's a guidance on the application of 14971 for medical device software. And when you go down that technical report or standard, you're going to find about halfway through it, there's this table that's 6 pages long that gives you all the different categories of risks, and it's really small font. So if they have 6 pages as an example of just the categories of risks, where do you get off with a table that's 3 rows long? There's no way that's enough. Now, not all 6 pages of those examples might apply to your device, but you might have multiple rows of examples where they only had 1 row. So I would expect multiple pages of software hazard analysis that you performed in accordance with 80,002-1. And if you want to know, well, will this work for all classifications of devices? Absolutely it will, because one of the best jobs I've ever seen a company do right out of the box for a brand new product. I was auditing a company it was an internal audit of an AED. So this is a class 3 PMA product. And right out of the box, what they did is they took all the risks that were in 80,002-1 and they applied them, and that was their first pass. And the FDA gave them their PMA. So this is a really good example of how to do this, not just for medium risk and low risk devices, but high risk too. This is how I would do it. And if you want to do something high quality, you start with the highest risk and do it that way. And if the FDA wants to see less documentation, great, but at least you know you have done a good job of this and you should have fewer problems with your device. So don't just come up with a couple lines here. Go to that standard, buy it, read it. And the best place, really, you're looking at AAMI. That's where you're going to want to buy that. And if you have an AAMI membership, then your discount that you're going to get for membership is going to pay for a lot of these standards that you're going to buy. So that's where I go get that. If you want to buy the 14971 or the 62304, you can get those on the evs.e Estonian website for standards. It'll be a little cheaper. And the second place I always look is looking at AAMI. ANSI has some inexpensive standards that are almost exactly priced as what AAMI has. So if you have an ANSI membership versus an AAMI membership, take advantage of your memberships. Okay, now we're going to get into the guidance documents, and there are multiple guidance documents for software. Some of them are really old. This is one of them. This is ancient. This predates just about everything out there. The risk management standard was out 2 years before, but that was really crude. And so this was the general principles of software validation. I don't think anybody is using the waterfall method. Everybody is using the V diagram, and I'll cover that later. But this was the ancient, this is the way you do software validation. I don't think there's hardly anybody following this as like a guidance, but it's free. So if you're doing this for the first time, you want to learn a little bit about it, great. But the other documents are going to be much more useful, especially some of the later guidance documents that I'm going to cover here. Off the shelf, this is one you definitely do need to pay attention to. This is the 2019 version. They updated it after the old one was 20 years old. So off the shelf software. We had a company come to us earlier this week that said, we submitted a 510K, the FDA gave us a deficiency list during the AI hold, and the software developers that we're working with, they're saying the FDA requirements for cybersecurity are so ridiculous, there's no way this software will ever pass if it has Microsoft Windows as the operating system. That's not true. There are a lot of devices out there, even high-risk devices, that have those systems out there as operating systems. There are workarounds where you can get an off-the-shelf system, even an operating system, to work on your device and have it be validated and have the FDA say this is secure. But you have to address all the points here in the off-the-shelf software guidance, and you have to understand how to apply the FDA's new cybersecurity requirements. There is a way around it. We've done it. We've helped other companies do this. So you can do it, but you don't have to switch over to Linux for everything or some proprietary system that you develop yourself. You can use open source software. You can use off-the-shelf software such as Microsoft Windows, but or sorry, yeah, for the operating system. But you need to make sure that you're monitoring the sites out there that tell you what the known vulnerabilities are, and you have to make sure that in your cybersecurity labeling, you've told people what risk controls they should be putting in place to make sure they don't have problems, such as malware protection, things like that. The next thing here is we're going to start getting into the FDA eSTAR. So the FDA eSTAR is now required for all 510(k) submissions. We recommend it for all de novo, and that door is closing very soon. So you'll have to start doing the de novos in the eSTAR. And then now they've, even with version 5.0, they've allowed you to now start doing PMA, traditional PMAs, not modular, but traditional PMAs in the eSTAR. So whether you've got a low risk device, a medium risk device, or a high risk device, you should still be using the eSTAR for your FDA submission. And one of the fundamental changes they made is they put in this new guidance document for 2023. I haven't gotten to it yet, but a lot of people are like, well, where is that requirement? When they finally learn they can't open up the FDA eSTAR without Adobe Acrobat, and they get Adobe Acrobat, and now they open up the version, they open up version 5.1, which is the most recent version, and they're like, where's the software section? I don't see it. Well, if you look in the revision history, which is on page 2, they say under version 5.0, they added cross-section change reminders that are telling you when you answer certain questions in the device description section, that's going to open up certain sections of the eSTAR. If you don't answer the question correctly in the yes/no dropdowns, then it's not going to populate that set of questions. So if you don't have any wireless functionality, you don't have any internet connectivity, you don't have cloud communication, any of those boxes there that I have in this second screen capture, if none of these are checked, except the none of the above, then you're not going to have cybersecurity. And if you don't check yes here, you're not going to have software. And if you look at, so when you click on this little question mark here for the help, these are all help buttons on the side for the FDA eSTAR, it's going to give you a JavaScript window. In that, one of the lines in the JavaScript window is choosing no will hide the questions in the software cybersecurity and interoperability section. So you have to click yes or it won't populate. If you leave it blank, that section is still not there. So you have to, on page 4, when you get to the general device characteristics in the device description section, you have to click yes for firmware and software. Then the next question will automatically populate. Does it have digital health technology? And if you don't know what that is, they actually have a help button that explains that. And it basically is saying those items below are the attributes that you have to say yes or no to. And you just check the box. And then it populates it accordingly. And the FDA knows what you should be having. So any cloud software is going to have cloud communication. So web-based software has cloud communication, obviously, or you can't access it. And it's going to have software updates applicable too, because you're going to update it in the cloud. So you're not going to have people uploaded somewhere. They're not going to get a new CD in the mail. That's not how it works with cloud-based or web-based software. So the example I will use for this training, if you are developing brand new software, and it's software as a medical device, and it's cloud-based, and let's say it's triage software, or let's say it's something that's going to help you automatically detect something. You're gonna upload a DICOM image, or you're gonna upload some sort of image that's going to be from imaging for, let's say it's for you're looking for an aneurysm or something. You're going to upload that DICOM image from your imaging system in whatever DICOM viewer you've got, and it's going to automatically analyze the image, and it's going to say, yes, we see something, or no, we don't. That's going to be high-risk software, but it could all be done in the cloud, and it might be some computer farm in India that's actually doing the calculations, but your interface is a web-based portal, and you just drag and drop the image over here, and it does calculations for you and spits out an answer for you. That's going to be high risk because of what you're looking for and what it's automatically detecting, and you're going to have updates to that software over time, guaranteed. So that's the example we use here. Something very simple in concept. for you to think about software as a medical device. What would we have to do for this kind of product? Here's the big guidance document. So this is 45 pages long. It was released last June. We updated our procedure. Mary Votter did that, and also Bhumika helped update a bunch of our templates. So between the two of them, we have all of our SYS 44 has been updated to this new guidance document, and the FDA eSTAR, when it went to 5.0, it updated as well to this. So everything we're covering here for you is the latest version of SYS 44 and the FDA's eSTAR. Okay, so for the software firmware section, this is on page 14 of your eSTAR. So you said yes to software, it populated the software section, and the very first thing you're going to see at the beginning of this is it says, what is your software documentation level? No more level of concern. So if you got level of concern, you're outdated, you're looking at the old version of the guidance, you need this guidance here, the 2023 one, and ask you, is it enhanced or basic? Basically what they did, there were so many companies that kept on saying, well, we're a minor level of concern, and the FDA would disagree. Pretty much anything you're submitting a 510K for is not going to be a minor level of concern. So they said everything, we're going to rename it as basic unless it's high risk, and then it will be enhanced. So the example I'm going to walk you through is an enhanced. But for the software section, even though you're going to provide more detail on the documents, and you're going to provide that unit testing information, and rather than just a summary, and you're going to provide more traceability information. They want more detail, and they have that in the guidance, and they explain it. But you're going to do the same amount of work. It's just how much the FDA wants to look at, not how much you have to do. And there is more work that you have to do for a Class C device. So if you've got one of these PMA products or a high-risk 510K, you may have some more documentation and more validation to do. But in general, it could be the same documentation, and you're going to share more if it's enhanced. But you're going to need to attach in a document that says what the documentation level is. So that's the first document you attach for software, and we have a template for that. That document is template 019, and one of the I did a little screen capture of part of that document. It actually asks you, is this a risk classification A, B, or C according to 62304? And then they tell you in the guidance document here, based on that guidance document, if any of these high-risk things apply, then it's going to be enhanced documentation. If none of them apply, that's essentially what your response is going to say in template 019. It's going to say none of these enhanced documentation requirements apply, and therefore it shall be a basic documentation. So that's how you document it, but we give you a template for that. So if you buy SYS 44, that's where you'll find it. And if you do not know what 62304 is, or want to know before you buy it, Matthew Walker did an awesome video that's also on YouTube. So when you type in what is 62304, that's the first video that will show up. He's the top of the list. He did a great job of that video. So go check that out. And you should buy that standard, because you cannot do this without it. And that's what our whole entire system is based on. And that's what the FDA bases their requirements on as well. So that's the first attachment. We have the section right below that on the next page. It's asking for document requirements 2 through 10. You can't leave any of these blue attachment buttons empty. You have to attach them to make it change from a red color code to a green color code. You can attach multiple documents, but you can't attach no documents. And you can't attach the same document to each of them. You can't attach the same document twice anywhere in the eSTAR. So you may have to do a screen capture to show it, or you may have to attach a justification explaining it can be found in some other document. But our advice to you is break it up into the separate documents, and that's how we've written our software validation procedure. SYS 44 has a bunch of different templates for the different requirements the FDA wants you to attach. So if you follow our system, all you have to do is attach our different templates, and that's what I'm going to walk you through. What's number 2, what's number 3, what's number 4, and you may have multiple versions for multiple validations or multiple software descriptions, because you might have software as a medical device, you might have firmware, and you might have software in a medical device, all three for a complex system. But in our example, we'll keep it simple, just software as a medical device. So you only have one attachment. So these are the the other 2 through 10 requirements that you have to attach. And every single one of them has a help button if you're looking, and every single one of them is explained in the FDA guidance document. This is design controls as it was taught in 1996. Nobody did design this way then. It was a concept. It helped it explain verification and validation to people, and what you're validating is user needs, and what you're verifying is design inputs, but it's not meant to be a linear process. Nobody goes straight through once and makes no mistakes and has a linear process. It's an iterative process. And this diagram doesn't show that well. In software, even more so. Nobody has ever done it this way. It's much more like a V diagram. So you don't know what a V diagram is? This is a V diagram. So every single time they do a test, they usually fail, and they have to go back a step and do some corrections and go through the process again. So you do unit testing, you fail, you go back and you do some more coding. You do it again, fail unit testing again until you no longer have a failure. Now you do integration testing in the 2 modules, the 2 units, see if they talk to one another correctly. Oh, it's not working correctly. Go back in more coding. Or maybe the design of the different modules and how they interact with one another, how they communicate, that might be the problem. And then you get to system testing and then simulated use. And you might be doing all your original testing on a sandbox and then actually do it on the final hardware that you're going to be doing. Or if you're doing software as a medical device for a cloud-based system, it could be on different browsers and different hardware and different types of connections. So all those kinds of things are going to be important to evaluate in your final testing. But you're going to start with units, then integration, then system testing before you get to the final simulated use in the operating environment. And it's not a linear process, it's an iterative development process. So to help you understand this a little bit more, here's what I created for people. When do you create these documents? I've identified what gets done when, and I'm trying to illustrate one more time the iterative sprints. We call them when we're doing rapid application development and you always forget the word when you want to give a presentation. So these iterative sprints that we do when we're doing software development, that's the modern method that everybody's using. Nobody's using waterfall anymore. Everybody's doing it this way because it's faster. But before you go coding any of your software, you're going to want to make sure those first 4 items, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are done. Now, you might revise those so that when we say done, it's iterative. So the first version of it, before you start any coding on your first version of your software, version 1.0, and maybe it's 0.1, it's a beta version. Before you do any coding, you're going to make sure you've identified what the software is supposed to do, a description. You've done a hazard analysis, maybe come up with a risk management plan for your software. You've done software requirements, you've documented what the requirements are, and you've done an architecture diagram. Now, which of those 4 is done first? That kind of depends on you. If you're a visual person, you might do an architecture diagram first. If you're more of a person that likes words and likes to write a lot, maybe you do an SRS first. If you're focusing on this from a risk management standpoint, maybe you're going to do the hazard analysis first. Maybe you're a quality person or you're the marketing person, you write the software description first. So depending on which kind of person you are or which part of the team you are, and honestly, most software teams have multiple people on it. You might divide and conquer. You might have different people and you do them all simultaneously and then have a meeting as your team and go share the documents amongst the team and make edits and then go back and do a couple more iterations before you say, okay, this is our final version. Now, either the team starts developing the software or you might even outsource it, or you might have some pieces outsourced and some pieces are in-house. Most of the software developers are working from home anyway, or a beach in Aruba. So wherever they're working from, whatever country, whatever language they're in, they're probably working remotely. And it really doesn't matter whether it's outsourced or in-house. But if you don't give people good inputs, your description, your hazard, your SRS, and your architecture diagram, you're going to get garbage and you're going to have a lot more rework to do. And I'm going to say this multiple times, at least I'm going to try to. One of your requirements has to be software cybersecurity controls. If you don't have security controls, and the FDA lists 8 of them in the eSTAR, if you don't have those as inputs in your SRS, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have to rewrite code. You will not get it through the FDA. Why? Because now the eSTAR says where are these found in your documentation, and it should be your SRS. If it's not there, you don't have it. Next, after you've got those 4 documents and you've agreed on what 0.1 is going to look like, now you can start coding. And you're going to have a 0.2, so you're going to have to go back and update all 4 of those documents. And you're going to then have to do more coding. And you're going to keep on doing those iterations as you go from a minimum viable product all the way to something that's your final version you're going to submit to the FDA. And then you're going to have new versions in the future, like version 2.0 that you'll launch publicly. Version 3.0, you're going to have products that you develop every year, new model years that you're going to release software for, new versions. Every single time you're going to go back to the beginning, update your device description, your risk management file, your SRS, and your architecture diagram. You might add a whole new module to the architecture. You may come up with a different security protocol. You may have a different interface. You may have gone from an iOS architecture to an Android architecture. All those things are really common changes that we see companies make post-market. Now, while you're coding, you're going to be working on your design specification. You might write the design specification and then code. You might code and then write your design specification. You might do them both at the same time. It depends on you. You're the person developing the software. So whichever way you work on, being somebody that's responsible for documentation, I would prefer to see the SDS done first and reviewed and approved by the team. And I'd like to see them, like, we all agree on what language we're going to use. We agree what environment we're going to use. We agree how we're going to structure the code. Maybe we have some coding rules that we use and coding practices that we have a guidance on internally. But depending on what your internal process is for how you code and how you develop software, that's going to define how that process looks. But that SDS is created and your code library, your source code is created during that phase. And then the next documentation requirement is just asking, what are your procedures? And you would also include all the templates associated with that. And I also included here work instruction 7, which is our cybersecurity procedure, because you can't have the cybersecurity without the software development anymore. You have to do these 2 together. And then at the very end, after you've done your coding, you're going to do your verification and validation testing. You're going to identify problems and go back to the beginning and add new requirements or revise your code. So add new requirements, revise your code. Maybe you identified a new hazard. Maybe you did cybersecurity testing and it failed and you had to go back and change it. So different types of verification validation tests. We have cybersecurity verification, vulnerability testing, pen testing. Every single vulnerability you find, go back and fix something. Oh, new bug we found, new hazard. And you're going to update your revision history over and over and over again. So 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.99. And then you have your unresolved anomalies. Some of them might be okay to launch with if they're just cosmetic and they don't cause any harm and they don't prevent the system from working. But some of them might be, nope, this is a showstopper. We can't release it like this. So that's what you do after your code. But everything is iterative, and you probably are going to want to have this diagram for training. Anybody new on software development, they really need to understand this basics. But I always ask people, like, what comes first? What comes at the end? This is the first time I've really put it in one slide. This is how it works. So I hope that helps people. Now we get into creating the individual documents on that previous slide. So the software description, we have a template for that. Template 018. I've listed on the side some bullet points of what's included in that, and we have the table of contents for your software description. You could put more or less details. So you might have machine learning in your device. So number 7 would be applicable. If you don't have any machine learning, you don't have AI software, then you delete that item. You don't have to have that in there if you don't have AI software. It was in there because a lot of people are using AI technology to develop their algorithms, but not everybody. Some people still use simple math techniques, simple statistical tools for calculating things instead of machine learning. So different ways of getting an algorithm, and one is more complex than the other, but isn't necessarily better than the other. So that's the second document, the device or the software description. And it should be very detailed, and they want the details of the algorithm. Trust us. Next, the risk management file. It's no longer just the hazard analysis. It's not a DFMEA. It should be some other tool, which I'm going to cover in the next slide, or maybe it's 2 slides later. But the hazard analysis, if you click on the little help button, it's going to pull up this JavaScript window, and it says in here, it talks about what they want you to provide. So risk management plan, hazard analysis, and risk management report should be the absolute minimum. But on the left-hand side there, we've got the table of contents that would be in that. And you could have something separate for software risk management from hardware risk management if you wanted to. You're certainly going to have something separate for human factors that the FDA wants. You're going to have a usability engineering file. Why wouldn't you have a software risk management file and also have a hardware risk management file? Because the 3 different approaches to doing risk management in different guidance documents. You have one is 14971, that's for the hardware. 80002-1 is for the software, and then for the cybersecurity, you're going to have the TIR 57, and then there's one more, the human factors, that's the IEC 62366. So there's 4 different types, and I actually have a blog about the 4 different types, and I think I've done a video too. 4 different types of risk management tools for 4 different types of products or components of your system. Now we get to the device hazard analysis. This is one of the tools we have in there, template 47. So this is one way of documenting it. It's not the only way of documenting it, but this is what a lot of people are doing. They use spreadsheets, they have their hazards identified, and they have the hazard numbers, and they have traceability across. The FDA says that the probability of occurrence is not best practice. So even though we've got probability in here, you may have the FDA pushing back on that, saying, no, that's not okay. What they're looking for is not just the probability of occurrence, but they're, could this, if it's cybersecurity, what is the probability of somebody being able to actually use that? Can they actually use that vulnerability to access your system, or is that they have to get through physical controls to get to your system so they can actually do it, like break open the box? That's a physical control. So depending on what your system is, you might have different things that you're putting in there, but this is one way of documenting it. It's not the only way. In the next slide here, once again, I'm pointing everybody to this is best practice for how you document software hazards. Software risk analysis is the application of 14971 to software medical devices. So this is where you go, and it still says level of concern there because I did this before the 2023 came out, but otherwise, all the other items are still things that you have to provide. And we just substituted the basic and enhanced with levels of concern. So that may help you understand that particular guidance. That's the most current version of it. So you should really go to purchase that, and that will help you do your hazard analysis. But there is another tool you could use instead of that spreadsheet like a lot of people are doing, and that's a fault tree diagram. Fault tree diagrams are designed to be able to do quantitative and semi-quantitative analysis. And I plagiarized this completely right from Carnegie Mellon. Julian DeLange wrote this blog in 2016, and it's about an open source fault tree analysis tool that they created, EMFTA. So I've actually did a little screen capture there that talks about what that EMFTA editor that they created. that you can download. It's an open source software. And I gave you an example from their site. So I also put the hyperlink in there. So if you want to learn more about fault tree, there's standards for fault tree analysis. They've been around since the 60s. So they use them all the time for the automotive industry, for automotive safety, and where to put a light at a traffic signal or a traffic sign on a road. So this fault tree analysis has been used by multiple industries many times, and there are some really interesting tools in here. And one of them is the basic concept of AND switches and OR switches. So the AND switches, both things have to occur in order for it to fail, whereas the OR, any one of those can fail to cause the failure. The OR possibilities could have your entire system crash because any one thing can cause it to crash. Whereas the AND, this is an extra measure of control you put in your system. Even though this failed, the whole system won't crash. So the AND switches are an extra level of protection in your system. So this way of pictorially showing the risks of your system and how it functions are extremely valuable, and they do it for a reason. So you might want to think about this tool. The other thing is the way this is structured is a top-down approach to risk management rather than a bottom-up approach. Your DFMEAs, your PFMEAs, your use FMEAs, those are all bottom-up. So you start with a failure mode and try to figure out what it will cause. Whereas when we get complaints, we say, this happened. That's the symptom. You're trying to figure out what caused it. So a fault tree is much more useful for when you're doing complaint analysis and trying to do a root cause investigation. Which of these potential root causes we already documented in our fault tree was the cause? So this is a really valuable tool for anybody that's doing software hazard software investigations to figure out, why did we have this failure of the software? Why did we have it crash? So think about this tool. It may be very valuable for you to integrate into your system. Now we're going to get into document number 4 that you have to attach, the software requirements specification. In this particular one, you have different tabs. So this is an Excel spreadsheet rather than a Word document. In the different tabs are, you have a cover, you have user needs, you have hardware requirements. So in our example, software as a medical device, that one goes away. And then software requirements, and then labeling requirements. You could even create a separate tab just for cybersecurity requirements. That would be a great idea. So all your software requirements would be listed in there, and then you would have your software requirement specification. You have your description of them. You would have the hazards so you're showing traceability. And even in here, you've got your software design specification. So this is a trace matrix, not just a SRS. Why provide the FDA your SRS and a trace matrix when you can just provide one that has both in it? Much more useful. So the FDA wants less documents. This is something we found the FDA likes to see, because they tend to look at the trace matrix, not at the individual. They don't want to switch back and forth between documents. So trace matrix is their preference on how to present the SRS requirements. But you might have an electronic system, an EQMS, or you might have something like matrix requirements design tool, and then you could have all these things in there, and you can display it in any format you want. So it could spit out a spreadsheet, or it could spit out a Word document or a PDF, whatever you want, but it can have that traceability between the hazards, the SDS, the test case, and the verification and validation reports. The next section here, the architecture design chart. We actually have a template for that, and I don't think I put in the reference to the template, but that's also in SYS 44. And this is just a screen capture of one of the examples that are provided in there. So people that we give a simple one that would be a high level, and this is much more showing the whole entire system and a lot more complicated. But if you have a complicated software tool, this might only be a subsection of the entire overall architecture of your software. So this is just an example that's provided, and you can see in there, it's got references to different requirements. So that's really helpful to know where the requirements fall in the different modules, because that can tell you, oh, I changed this part of the code, so these are the requirements that change, and I can go back to my trace matrix and find out what test cases I have to look at. And you also want to look at, whenever you do a change, you're not just going to retest that box, you're also going to look at the inputs and outputs as well. So you look a little bit broader than just the box where you made the change. You want to look at the inputs into that and the outputs and see if it affected those as well. So you do a little bit more retesting. A lot of times what we're doing is regression analysis to see what the impact is going to be and whether we need to redo the validation or not. The next attachment is going to be your software design specification. I've given you a little screen capture here, Mary's example of function 1. So these are the different things that you would put down for, it gives you examples of what it would put down. And you're going to have so many different functions for your software. Each function would have its own box like this for the software design specification. So a lot of people are like, how much detail we put? How should it be organized? Here's an example. So, and that can all be found in template 13. The next item here, we have the software development environment. So this is pointing the FDA to our procedures. You're going to give them your software development plan, which is going to be template 9. And I'm doing a little screen capture of that software development plan table of contents. You're also going to give them SOS 44, which is your software validation procedure, and your cybersecurity work instruction, which is work instruction 7. So that's what you would provide the FDA to address that requirement. So you'd attach all 3 documents. You might even attach some other documents that you might have developed as well. Maybe work instruction 8, which we're going to be releasing in a couple weeks here, maybe even next week, for when you find vulnerabilities, what do you do? So it's incident reporting policy. Number 8, the verification and validation testing. So for this, you're going to have protocols and reports. We have a template 25 for protocols, template 26 for reports, but you will have multiple ones of these. And a lot of the tests are going to be more automated in nature. So you're going to have pass-fail results. And so you might provide a summary of those pass-fail results in a table, or you might actually provide full test reports if it's a more higher risk software, or you're doing later stage validation like a system test. Number 9 document is the revision level history. So this shows you a screen capture of template 14, where you're providing the software revision level history. I've been trying to show some of the comments off the side. So Bhumika and Mary have added comments to people to the templates to answer the questions of what goes here, what level of detail. So it sort of prompts you like a work instruction on how to fill in the form. And then you can just delete those contents once you're done with the document. But that really helps people that are new to this. And this is for the software revision level history. In each row would be a new version that you're going to do. And you could just provide the latest version you provided the FDA, but what they want to see is the major changes you've made along the way. They don't expect you did this linearly in one try and it worked perfectly out of the box. They expect you had many, many times where you did development. This is agile development, and we're going to have many sprints, and we have the final version might be version 99. And so you have all those versions listed there. The more version history information you have, the more real it looks to the FDA and more thorough your development has been. And then the last section that they have in the eSTAR is the unresolved anomalies. So this is the last section before you get to the cybersecurity section in the eSTAR. It asks for unresolved anomalies, and it's template 48. And ideally, you've resolved all the anomalies. So there are none, and you can just state that there are none. But if there are any during the development process, you will have some. You're going to state that these that remain, they're okay to release because it doesn't cause a risk to the patient or the user, or result in an erroneous result, or the system not functioning. So any of those things would be a showstopper, but you might have some things that are very rare that aren't going to be a serious problem, and you might be able to release it with those. And that's the kind of things you would include in this bug report or unresolved anomalies template. I showed you this slide before, but I added two more rows at the very end. So after you have developed your software, after you've submitted your 510K, and after you've received clearance, you're going to have to make changes to your software. In fact, during that maybe it was 125 days to review your 510K. During that period of time, you may have fixed some of those bugs. During that time, you might have had to make changes to satisfy the FDA. During that time, you might have added new features that are going to be security patches or software updates, adding new features, bug fixes, maybe a new operating system, maybe integration with a new hardware, made it work with a new operating system, whatever it is, you add those things. You're going to want to update your software. When you update your software, you have to decide, am I going to have to submit a special 510K or traditional 510K because of these updates? There's a guidance document for software updates to determine whether you need to or not. We cover that in SYF6, which is our change control procedure. The FDA has it in a guidance, software modifications, decision whether you have to submit a 510K or not. And one of the strategies for software as a medical device is to do every year do a special 510K before the number of releases that you have gotten has become so large that you have no choice but to do a traditional submission. So small little changes, you can probably do a special 510K. Lots of releases, probably going to have to do a traditional. So that could be a strategy. And the special 510Ks are a 30-day review instead of a 90-day review. So the FDA spends less time. In addition to the things that you're going to probably do right away, after you launch your product commercially, you're required to do post-market surveillance. Now, the FDA doesn't currently have a post-market requirement in the QSR, but the QMSR does because it incorporates by reference ISO 1345 in clause 8.2.1 is post-market, and the FDA did not say you're getting out of that. They are allowed to look at those records. You do have to comply with it under the QMSR, and you will be expected to do post-market surveillance. So one of the things you should be asking in post-market surveillance is, are there any bugs that you know of in the software that we need to fix? Great question. Another one is, are there any security vulnerabilities that you're aware of that we should address? That would be another one. Any functions that we should add? Any operating systems you'd like it to work with? Any interoperability with other accessories that you've identified? Maybe Wi-Fi or Bluetooth communication to some other device. New operating systems. There's Windows 11 and we made it for Windows 10. So that's another update. All these things are things you should be learning in post-market surveillance. Do not forget, you should also be asking, is there anything in the instruction for use that wasn't clear? That would be a great question. A labeling question. Is there anything you think we ought to add or make more clear in the cybersecurity labeling? There's a thought. Maybe there's something in the training materials we should update. Maybe there is something where you could ask, what indication for use have you used it for? Rather than asking the question, are you using it for this indication? Have it more open-ended, like a good interviewer or a good auditor. What indications do you use this for, and see if they're using it off-label? That's a great question. You can also ask, are there any tasks that are difficult to perform or not intuitive or hard to follow or confusing? That might indicate a use error. So you're required to do post-market surveillance for use errors as part of your usability engineering file. So that's another example of where you're going to do post-market surveillance. So you want to look at cybersecurity vulnerabilities. You want to look at bug fixes. You want to look at labeling that needs to be more clear, training that's needed, as well as any kind of physical, this is not intuitive. This is backwards. This is hard to perform. This requires too many clicks. All those kinds of things are things that you would gather in post-market surveillance. It would help you improve your product. So you want to be systematic and methodical about how you're going to collect that information. And because it's software as a medical device, you're probably going to gather that information electronically. And it might go into something like Jira. It'd be a new Jira instance, and it's coming in the technical support team, and that's giving you feedback for your new product development. So don't forget to ask those questions and have it automated, collect it, and go into the system so you come up with new and better software all the time. So that should be a very tight system that's continuously done, and automate those reports for yourself as best you can. And then you have to make the decision. If we identify a vulnerability and we have an incident where somebody took advantage of that vulnerability, then we're going to have work instruction 8, which we're going to hopefully release next week. That's the cybersecurity incident policy. So what do you do when a cybersecurity incident occurs, like a ransomware attack or something like that? Denial of service, something like this. Then in addition to that, you're going to have SYS 6, which is your change control procedure. Any change you need to make to your software or your labeling, that's going to require approval of that change to your design of your system. Labeling is also covered as design. And you have to make a decision, is this requiring a 510K or not? If it requires a 510K, then you have to go back and create a new design history file. And you may only be updating the SRS, may only be updating some of these documents rather than creating them from scratch. So you might have a much faster development process, but you still have to go through all those documents and submit a new 510K for if it requires a 510K. If it doesn't, then you might be able to do an abbreviated process that's just covered under change control instead of a whole brand new design history file, and you can update your DMR or medical device file. So that's what you would do post-market versus what you do pre-market. I hope that helps people, and it's really not covered in any of our other trainings. So I wanted to include that and give you the references to the procedures. It's SYS 19 for post-market surveillance. Work instruction 8 is the new work instruction for cybersecurity incident policy or response policy. And then we also have SYS 6, which is change control. That's the end of our session. I do not see questions in the chat. So now's the time to put questions in the chat or to unmute your mic and ask questions. So you can do that as well. And then also we have webinars that are coming up. So I've added a lot of new stuff to the list. And you will see on the list there, we have Mary is going to do a new webinar on the software tool validation procedure. So SYS 51 is our software tool validation. If you have quality system software that you've implemented, you're going to need to validate that. So Mary's going to do a training on that, show you how to use that procedure. And then Bhumika is going to do one on cybersecurity. She did one a few years ago. A lot has changed in that time, including a new FDA guidance and the new eSTAR. So she's changed all the templates, but we need a work instruction training to go with that. And I should have put the reference to WI007. I will update that on the page. But Bhumika is going to do that on April 11th. So we got a lot of things coming. Today's is the first one on the list, but next week we'll have an on-demand recorded formative usability testing. So that might be very interesting to a lot of people out there that have never done formative testing. And Monday, we're going to be doing a live one on usability. We haven't updated our webinar on usability in a long time, so I'm going to do that on Monday as well. So I hope that's helpful to everybody. I didn't update the clock there, but our live YouTube is every Friday. Live streaming YouTube videos are every Friday at 12:30. So tomorrow, design and manufacturing information for your device master file will be covered. So if you're interested, subscribe and ring the bell so you get the notification of when I go live. But it's 12:30 every Friday Eastern time. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope this was really helpful to you. And any questions you want me to answer, just put them down below in the chat. In the comments in YouTube. That will be the best place to put it because this is going to be posted live. And certainly, please share this with other people. Anybody that's interested in SYS 44, this will be included with that is the training for how to use SYS 44. And in addition to that, if you have anybody that doesn't know how to document things and where to put it in the eSTAR for software, this is the video for them. Thank you, everybody, and I appreciate your attendance. See you next time.